really want to be competitive globally, we have to have the best educated workforce, and that means we have to have college for every child, man or woman who wants to attend. Other countries have already done it. It's time this country catches up. It's time this country says to every citizen, you can be whatever you want to be in America.
That Governor Cuomo at LaGuardia Community College in Queens this morning. Now, he was joined by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders to announce an ambitious plan to provide free tuition to eligible college students. It would apply to both 2- or 4-year state and city schools for people with household incomes below $125,000. Cuomo administration estimates that 1 million students would qualify, and it would cost nearly $200 million for starters. Jeannie, I know everyone's going to be shocked because you look like you are a co-ed yourself, but you have been an educator on a few campuses here. And my question is, that represents about 80% of the households, talking about a whole bunch of kids. I saw a number today that the average kid's walking out of a New York school here with 30 grand in debt. You've seen some of this firsthand. It sounds like a great idea. We'll get in the math as to how it gets paid for, but how big of a difference would this make if it was true, if it actually happened?
This is exactly what everybody, and I give Governor Cuomo a huge amount of credit. This is what governors across the country should be doing, and this is quite frankly what President-elect Trump should be thinking about as he gets into office. The cost of a college education in this country is outrageous. And you mentioned average $30,000. Let's not forget that that means half of those students are $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in debt when they come out of college. In many cases, unable to find jobs to start making those loan repayments. So this is exactly what Bernie Sanders, and we should give Hillary Clinton as well credit. We're talking about, you know, Bernie Sanders wanted to go a little bit further in some of his discussions during the presidential campaign, and Hillary Clinton had a slightly more modest plan. But I give Governor Cuomo credit because this is going to be the type of thing we think about the states as kind of where we see democracy really living and where we see it, you know, experiments going on. This is what should happen. And of course, you have to think about how you're going to pay for it. There should be an income cutoff. We should be dealing with students and families below a certain income. But that said, this is exactly what we need to do. And I think what we've got to keep saying is this is not just an investment in these students and these families. It's an investment in the community. You have to invest in education for your students in the community so they stay in the state. And that's something else I would like to see them tie to this, is you work and you stay in the state if possible, but that you also are able to come out and get jobs and raise a family and live comfortably in a way that makes sense. And so this is exactly what needs to be done.
Andrew, in terms of the paying for it, we talked about some of the cutoffs. $125,000 for a household would be eligible for it. This probably would be looking at it as an income tax, that there'd be, that's where the revenues would be generated, an additional tax for it. With everything with Andrew Cuomo, it's a political calculation. He clearly thinks this is a winner here. You think there's an appetite for that?
I think there's an appetite on the left, and there's an appetite among progressives and Democrats. I think there's far less of an appetite on the Republican right, who will be much more focused on how to pay for it all. There's another factor that I'm sure Dominic is champing at the bit to bring up, which is this looks awfully good on a progressive resume for a potential presidential run for Andrew Cuomo in 4 years. No surprise. I mean, the big hint was that Bernie Sanders was on stage next to him. So if there was any indication as to what he was trying to do with this all, look, the devil is in the details on this. I like the idea of paying for college tuition for everybody, but you know, that's right next to that unicorn and Sasquatch. How much of a reality can you actually make this thing? And with Republicans in control of the state Senate, how are you going to bend those arms to actually get them to pay for it?
Yes, but Republicans in the state Senate in Albany are very different than Republicans in Washington right now, and Republican control in many ways name only with Klein and friends, Dominic. It's interesting. To the outside of New York or outside of the people who follow, Andrew Cuomo fiscally, he ain't no Bernie Sanders, right? But on social issues and certain ones, he is. I give him credit for one thing. He's the first one out in front of this, and he will not be the last. He's going to get credit, whether this fails or succeed, by having Sanders next to him, but also who's against making college affordable here? I think every single parent out there is saying, finally, somebody's saying what I'm going through.
Richard, I hate to be the pessimist at the table. Full disclosure, I went to college in New York State courtesy of the taxpayer. So I'm one of these types of kids that benefited from this type of program. But let's cut through the nonsense. Every year when it comes time for State of the State address, the governor jumps out there. And I guess it has a little something to do with wanting to be the Democratic nominee in 4 years.
What?
The governor jumps out. So what was that, a unicorn?
Yeah, and Sasquatch.
And Sasquatch. The governor jumps out. I love the idea. But how are you going to pay for it, Richard?
Well, put it this way. We said that. We've said that before. Like, remember that Tappan Zee Bridge? You go over it every night here?
Right.
That cost a multiple of this, right? And we still are not exactly sure
Good
we're
point.
paying for it.
Good
My
point.
point is, this is 160 mil to a couple hundred mil for starters. That's not the final payment by any means. And again, this isn't for every private college or anything in New York State. These are for the state colleges and the city colleges, the community colleges, right? I think you can find that money.
Using your example of the Tappan Zee Bridge, I agree with you. And I hope that I'm wrong. But my 2 cents says this is nothing but political talk. As usual, it happens every year around. Just pull up the clips. Every State of the State time, there's a new idea for this, a new idea for jail educating inmates, a new idea for this, a new idea for that. And right after State of the State, it all goes away. And the governor says the Republicans
My
wouldn't let
cynical
me do
friend
it.
is more right than wrong on this one. I do think ideas are not a bad thing for them to try. I think this idea is, though, its time is now. Gina said it far better than I can. There are tipping points in households across this country where people just say, I can't do it anymore. And then people have to decide between which kids get to do it or not. And there's no end in sight with these tuition hikes. I mean, it makes sense.
I agree with the eloquent description of the need that Jeannie elaborated on for this program. And I accept Dominic's cynical view as to the motive of Governor Cuomo, perhaps partially, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It's a great idea. It's an important idea. Think of all of the programs that people thought were impossible. Social Security, to keep elderly people out of poverty, which happened at the beginning of the 20th century when Social Security passed. Medicare, Medicaid, prescription drugs for seniors. Lots of things that were deemed impossible came to be possible. You talk about dollars, they say it's $163 million to $200 million more to have this added to the existing $5,100 tuition assistance that they provide already at state colleges. To find $163 million in a New York State budget of tens of billions of dollars, I don't think is that hard.
$100 billion, yeah.
I don't think it's that difficult.
No, I'm with you, and I think this might have more of a chance than some of those other unicorn ideas that don't go anywhere. All right, coming up next, editor of the Wall Street Journal says if Donald Trump says something false, it isn't necessarily a lie. Well, if that's a sign of how the media will cover the new president, what does that say about the next 4 years? Stay with us.